There are few things as controversial as choosing to eat red meat every day. There's nothing like an overly long video game boss fight to make you want to pull out your hair in frustration. Whether it's a juicy burger, a nice steak, or even a delicious taco, red meat is something that people tend to either love or hate. You know what we're talking about, the kind of boss battles that are so hard, so long, and so ridiculous that you want to scream, "Just die already." From intense action-packed fights to protracted battles lasting 18+ hours. Yes, really, let's take a look back at some of the worst and longest boss fights ever in video games. Yiazmat, Final Fantasy XII. The Final Fantasy franchise has a notorious reputation for its ridiculously hard bosses, and for good reason. There are people who say red meat is terrible for you, and there are others who claim that it's full of essential vitamins and nutrients. Whatever red meat camp you belong to, though, it's no secret that the protein source has both pros and cons. But what would happen if you ate red meat every day? How would your body react to a lot of red meat? Would the amount you consume make a difference? Well, there's a lot of research out there on the side effects of eating red meat, and it's all pretty complicated. The dragon Yiazmat from the 2006 single-player RPG Final Fantasy XII is just one famous example. However, it's still important to take to heart the possibilities of what red meat can do to you because it may make a big impact on your health. Though red meat tends to get a bad reputation among health-conscious people, it isn't all bad for you. Proving that numbers have absolutely no meaning to Square Enix, Yiazmat weighs in with over 50 million health. In fact, red meat has a lot of nutrients in it, so, if you eat red meat every day, you'll be providing your body with great nutrition. In contrast, the average character facing this beast might have anywhere from 8,000 to 12,000 health. According to Healthline, red meat is rich in a number of vitamins, helping you meet your recommended daily allowance. His insane amount of hit points, special abilities and devastating attacks make Yiazmat particularly difficult to beat. Once you get Yiazmat to 50% health, all attack damage against him is capped at 6,999 HP, which turns this boss fight into a protracted battle. Even worse, Yiazmat can fully heal himself if he manages to cast certain spells. For instance, 3.5 ounces of ground red meat that boasts 10% fat can help you meet 25% of your B3 needs, 18% of the RDA for B6, and 37% of the RDA for B12, and that's not to mention the selenium and zinc red meat provides. Additionally, Healthline reported that red meat is also rich in important nutrients like creatine and carnosine, and people who don't eat meat may be low in these. Creatine and carnosine impact your brain and muscular functions, so they're definitely important for overall health. When you eat processed red meat every day, you could be consuming cancer-causing chemicals. Not all red meat is created equal. Extremely skilled gamers might be able to beat Yiazmat in about an hour, but most players will need at least 3 or 4 hours to get the job done. He was watered down slightly for the 2017 remastered version of FFXII, but the original Yiazmat will wipe the floor with you unless you have the right gear and a solid strategy. The end. Metal Gear Solid 3. Unlike many of the other intense boss battles we've listed, the final encounter with the end in Metal Gear Solid 3 is more a test of your skill and endurance, especially in your first playthrough. That's certainly true when it comes to processed red meat because it's almost in a completely different category than other red meats. As Healthline reported, a lot of today's meat products are highly processed. These meats may be smoked, cured, then treated with nitrates, preservatives and various chemicals. Additionally, the World Health Organization has classified processed meat as Group 1, carcinogenic to humans. According to the World Health Organization, this is because carcinogenic chemicals that form during meat processing include N-nitroso compounds and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. The EN's sniper rifle might be fitted with tranquilizer darts instead of bullets, but one wrong move will still put an end to your game. This fight requires stealth, finesse, and patience as you try to track the end while avoiding detection. Most players should expect to spend a good 2 or 3 hours on this fight their first time. If all that sneaking around sounds boring, you can always use one of the many cheats and workarounds available to take the easy way out of this boss battle. Some of these chemicals are known or suspected carcinogens. Because of that, the organization recommends decreasing the amount of processed red meat you consume, but that doesn't mean you have to stop eating it altogether, just be mindful of your portions. If you eat red meat every day, your gut health may suffer. One of the most crucial pieces of the puzzle that is your health is your gut, and gut health is especially important for a high-functioning immune system. According to Healthline, the microorganisms in your gut are essential to a healthy body. You can snipe the end early during a cutscene, use the Konami code on your map screen to reveal his location, or even get him to die of old age by saving the game and turning your console off for a week. And as it turns out, if you eat red meat every day, you won't be doing your gut health any favors. According to family physician Dr. Joel Furman, red meat isn't good for your gut health. If you want to acquire the Enz Moss Camo or modified Mosin Nagant rifle, you'll have to defeat him non-lethally, which presents a whole new set of challenges. When you eat red meat, you are unnecessarily exposing your body to carcinogens, your blood flow is being compromised, oxidative stress and inflammatory markers are rising, and you are eating a food that provides no sustenance for your microbiome, Furman told HuffPost. While these are all fun Easter eggs, absolutely nothing beats the thrill of defeating this legend the old-fashioned way, if you have the patience to do it right. Boss Rush Yami Okami. It may be one of the most highly rated action-adventure games of all time, but Okami also has one of the most dreaded final boss sequences of all time, the Boss Rush. In this kind of final boss battle, a player must square up for a rematch with all of the previously defeated bosses before going on to face some final big bad for the ultimate challenge. Okami stays true to the boss rush tradition. At the wreckage of the Ark of Yamato, you must fight and defeat all of the major demons from the game again before you even see the final boss. Once you've gotten past the boss rush, you're then pitted against Yami, the demon leader who helped kill all of the gods long ago. As you might expect, the fight against Yami takes forever, as she shifts through multiple forms and phases along the way. Although Okami got a remastered HD release in December 2017, this sequence of fights is just as difficult today as it was back in 2006 on the PlayStation 2. While that isn't to say that red meat hurts your gut health, it certainly doesn't help your gut health, particularly when compared to high-fiber or fermented foods. If you eat red meat every day, be sure you're also consuming plenty of gut-healthy foods and consider taking probiotics. If you eat grass-fed beef every day, you'll receive high-quality vitamins your body needs in addition to the health benefits that red meat in general has. One particular kind of red meat has even more nutrients: grass-fed beef. Between the boss rush and the protracted battle with Yami, expect the Okami endgame to take you at least 2 or 3 hours to complete, assuming you don't fail and have to start the fight over. Nick's avatar, Shin Megami Tensei. Persona 3. In the 2006 RPG Shin Megami Tensei, Persona 3, you do battle against the demon Nyx twice, and the second time around is a doozy. That isn't to say that you should only eat grass-fed beef and no other lean proteins, but there is something to be said about how grass-fed beef has a different makeup than regular red meat or processed red meat. According to Mayo Clinic, grass-fed beef tends to have less total fat, and more heart-healthy omega-3 fatty acids, along with conjugated linoleic acid, which may lower your risk for heart disease and cancer. As might be expected from a battle with the personification of death itself, Nyx offers up quite a few challenges for players. Additionally, grass-fed beef has a lot more vitamin E when it comes to red meat. Grass-fed beef tends to be the healthiest, as some studies have suggested. So, if you have the option to choose grass-fed beef over regular red meat, the grass-fed option would definitely be a healthier choice. When you eat red meat every day, it can lead to heart disease. The best way to go about most foods is to keep in mind that moderation is key. In the final battle of Persona 3, you go up against the avatar of Nyx, who has the appearance and traits of your classmate Ryoji Mochizuki. Throughout the fight, the Nyx avatar will shift through 14 different arcana. For those unfamiliar with Persona 3, that means you must battle this boss through 14 phases to defeat it. Even if you manage to get to the final phase, things can still turn against you in an instant. Following a strict elimination diet where you can't have sugar, dairy, gluten, meat, or whatever else usually isn't sustainable. In her final form, Nyx avatar has abilities that reflect all attacks and deal heavy damage. Additionally, extremely unlucky players might get hit by Nyx's charm spell, which can let her trick one of your party into giving her a full heal. Red meat fine is in moderation, but, if you eat red meat every day, it could lead to heart disease. Count on this fight taking at least an hour or more to finish, especially on your first playthrough or with an underpowered party. Abyssian, Tales of Symphonia. The one saving grace of Abyssian from the 2003 RPG Tales of Symphonia is that he's completely optional. If players were actually required to defeat Abyssian, you'd probably find a lot more people giving up on Tales of Symphonia out of sheer frustration. In the setup to this boss fight, Abyssian sends you to retrieve a set of cursed weapons called the Devil's Arms. He claims he plans to lock these horribly evil weapons away in some deep dark place forever. Although, the research behind that claim isn't black and white. One 2016 study from the School of Public Health at China's Shandong University that was published in Public Health Nutrition reported that higher consumption of total red meat and processed meat is associated with an increased risk of total, cardiovascular and cancer mortality. However, it's important to note that there's a difference between red meat in general and processed red meat. Oh, and by the way, the Devil's Arms might try to turn you insane, but everything will be just fine if you just don't listen to the voices. Right. After you finally gather all of the weapons, Abyssian turns on you in a sudden yet inevitable betrayal and the true boss fight begins. According to Healthline, though red meat in general is linked to an increased risk of heart disease, eating processed red meat appears to have an even harsher effect on your body. Watching how much red meat you eat can help keep you aware of your risk, so be sure to be mindful. If you eat red meat every day, you might be at an increased risk for colorectal cancer. Red meat's potential to lead to cancer has been a huge topic in the health industry, via the New York Times, and while there is credible evidence that eating red meat every day could lead to cancer, it's a certain kind of cancer that consuming a lot of red meat can put you at risk for. Specifically, Healthline reported, the main type of cancer that red meat is believed to cause is colorectal cancer, the fourth most commonly diagnosed cancer in the world. One 2017 study from the Department of Epidemiology and Preventive Medicine at Gifu University Graduate School of Medicine concluded that a higher intake of processed meat was associated with a higher risk of colon cancer in men. So, there is evidence that red meat can lead to colorectal cancer, but there are also a lot of variables at play. He can use many of your own skills against you, and many of his spells do truly incredible amounts of damage. Unless you get extremely lucky or have a high-level party, a successful Abyssian fight will probably take an hour or more. Ma'il Radek, Killzone 2. This fight may not take as long as some of the others, but the boss fight with Ma'il Radek in 2009's Killzone 2 feels like it takes forever, especially for a first-person shooter. Instead of a long and protracted battle seen in some turn-based games, the final fight with Killzone 2's Helghast Commander is a heart-stopping 30-plus minutes of bullet hell. That includes how the meat is cooked, which could mean the results of the Gifu University study, which was published in Cancer Science, aren't completely accurate. The first challenge you must deal with is figuring out how to defeat the multiple waves of soldiers Radek throws at you throughout the boss fight. Each wave is successively harder, and the final one consists of relentless waves of elite Helghast soldiers with rocket launchers. Finally, Radek comes after you himself, forcing you to stay on your toes if you want to avoid getting scragged. He's an expert in both long-range and up-close combat, and his armor can withstand even a rocket launcher blast. Still, if you eat red meat every day, it's probably safe to say you're likely at a greater risk of developing colorectal cancer than someone who doesn't. You're more likely to be diagnosed with diabetes if you eat red meat every day. According to the American Diabetes Association, more than 34 million people in the United States had diabetes in 2018. Even worse, Radek comes equipped with both a teleporter and a personal cloaking device, which makes it child's play for him to suddenly attack you from behind when you're least expecting it. And diabetes can be a debilitating and deadly disease. Prepare to respawn lots of times before you get the timing and strategy on this boss battle right. Darth Vader, The Force Unleashed 2. The entire plot of the 2010 action game Star Wars, The Force Unleashed 2 revolves around the conflict between Darth Vader and a clone of his former Sith apprentice, Starkiller. So, the fact that red meat might contribute to diabetes should have you thinking twice before picking up that ribeye from the butcher. In fact, a 2010 study from the Department of Epidemiology at Harvard School of Public Health found that the consumption of processed meats, but not red meats, is associated with higher incidence of CHD and diabetes mellitus. Another study, this one from Duke NUS Medical School in 2017, reported that a higher intake of red meat and poultry is associated with significantly increased risk of developing diabetes, which is partially attributed to their higher content of heme iron in these meats. Diabetes can be fatal, and keeping yourself healthy is one way to prevent the disease. For many, that may mean making the decision to not eat red meat every single day. Your body will receive plenty of iron if you eat red meat every day. Obviously, red meat has plenty of beneficial nutrients. And on top of all the protein and vitamins in it, red meat is also a great source of iron, which is critical for a healthy body and is something of which most adults aren't getting enough. According to the United States Department of Agriculture, 100 grams of grass-fed beef contains about 2.4 milligrams of iron. After the clone goes rogue and escapes Vader's grip, the two clash on several occasions, culminating in a final boss fight with Vader at the game's end. The fight lasts for 3 phases that get progressively harder, and more repetitive. All said, the final boss battle with Vader isn't extremely difficult, but the mechanics of the fight are mind-numbing. You spend the entire time ineffectually hacking at him, which is interrupted by a cutscene where Starkiller shouts something whiny, followed by fights with waves of clones. As registered dietitian nutritionist Allison Baker told Livestrong, iron is a critical micronutrient for everything from cellular oxygen transport to healthy skin and nails. However, because iron isn't always absorbed well in the body and because menstruating women lose iron, there are a lot of individuals at risk for a deficiency, Baker explained. So, since so many people lack enough iron in their diets, choosing to eat red meat every day could be a smart choice. Although it's still smart to practice moderation, and stick to lean, grass-fed red meats when possible. You could lose weight if you eat red meat every day. With all the negative press surrounding red meat, it's also important to note that the food has a lot of positives as well. Red meat tends to be a great way to get in more protein in your diet, which is a crucial macronutrient. Registered dietitian nutritionist Allison Baker, who is vice president of business development at a personalized nutrition company, told Livestrong that red meat can be great for a low-fat protein source. While all animal-sourced proteins are what is considered complete, the sometimes lower fat levels observed in grass-fed beef can result in an overall higher percentage of protein, ounce for ounce, Baker said. Additionally, Livestrong noted that protein like red meat has also been linked to weight loss because it curbs hunger and keeps blood sugar levels stabilized, preventing cravings. So, when you eat more protein, you're less likely to binge eat other not-so-nutritious foods, which may lead to weight loss. It may not be the longest on our list in minutes, but this fight with Darth Vader definitely drags way too long. Lord Kazak, World of Warcraft. Back in the vanilla era of World of Warcraft, it was possible to taunt certain raid bosses and get them to chase you all over Azeroth. Additionally, staying full by eating red meat can give you more energy to work out, which could also contribute to weight loss. You might get kidney stones if you eat red meat every day. It's pretty well known that spinach is one food thought to cause kidney stones. But that doesn't mean other foods, such as red meat, don't also lead to the painful condition. Red meat can cause kidney stones, too. Many players took advantage by frequently kiting the demon Lord Kazak from his spot in the Blasted Lands to the Alliance capital of Stormwind City. The walk probably took an hour or more, but their patience paid off once Kazak reached the walls of Stormwind. Lord Kazak cast a debuff that healed him for 25,000 HP every time it damaged a player. He instantly regenerated 70,000 HP every time he killed a player, pet, or totem. After a few minutes wreaking havoc and slaughtering low-level characters in Stormwind, Lord Kazak started casting endless shadowbolt volleys at anyone nearby. These combined factors made Kazak essentially invincible any time he paid a visit to Stormwind. According to WebMD, a kidney stone is exactly that, a hard mass of minerals and salts that forms in the kidneys. Kidney stones are painful and may require a visit to the hospital for treatment. To prevent kidney stones, it's important to be mindful of what you eat. Even high-level players wielding the legendary Thunderfury, Blessed Blade of the Windseeker, were no match for him. As a result, Lord Kazak would rampage around the city for hours while characters fled in terror or threw their puny attacks his way. Per WebMD, eating a lot of red meat causes your body to make more uric acid. Additionally, it can rob your system of citrate, a substance that helps keep away kidney stones and maybe keep existing ones from growing. Drinking plenty of water can help prevent kidney stones, so if you're dead set on eating red meat every day, at least make sure you're also staying hydrated. If you eat red meat every day, your cholesterol might go up. One of the more complicated issues you can have because of eating red meat every day is high cholesterol, something that can lead to other health conditions. According to Mayo Clinic, cholesterol is a waxy substance found in your blood. Your body needs cholesterol to build healthy cells, but high levels of cholesterol can increase your risk of heart disease. Even though cholesterol is necessary, eating red meat every day can cause your cholesterol to get to unhealthy levels. Specifically, a 2019 study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that red meat, as well as white meat, can raise your cholesterol if you eat too much. The griefers who brought the boss to Stormwind could sit back and enjoy the chaos and destruction until a GM finally showed up to get Kazak out of the city. Blizzard eventually got tired of the pranksters and patched the game to prevent bosses from wandering too far from their spawn point. Absolute Virtue and Pandemonium Warden, Final Fantasy XI. If you've ever played a MMORPG, you're probably familiar with long nights spent trying to take down a difficult raid boss. According to Healthline, researchers discovered that red and white meat had the same impact on cholesterol levels, including LDL, when they had the same saturated fat levels. So even if you eat chicken every day instead of red meat, you could still be at risk for high cholesterol. While there's no real way to avoid the fat in red meat, if you eat it regularly you can reduce your fat intake in other ways, like cutting back on creamer in your coffee via WebMD. The more red meat you eat, the higher the risk you'll have for experiencing IBS symptoms. Irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS, can be seriously debilitating. Over the years, the Final Fantasy XI MMO has offered up two prime examples of extremely long boss fights. If you aren't clear on what IBS is, it's a disorder where you experience a lot of cramping, abdominal pain, bloating, gas, and diarrhea or constipation, or both, according to Mayo Clinic. Additionally, Mayo Clinic states that IBS is a chronic condition that you'll need to manage long-term, so there's really no cure for it other than to watch for what can trigger it. And unfortunately, red meat, as well as other foods like wheat and dairy products, is a common trigger for irritable bowel syndrome. The megaboss Absolute Virtue was first introduced in late 2004. But every time a group managed to defeat it, the devs would patch the game to fix alleged bugs with the boss, thus nullifying these previous strategies. Even after Square Enix released an Absolute Virtue hint video in 2008, players still couldn't figure out how to reliably beat it. While there are a lot of things that can increase your risk of experiencing painful or uncomfortable IBS symptoms, such as stress levels, red meat is something that you should stay away from if you have the condition. Despite the game's warning to play in moderation, a top FFXI GM claimed a legitimate Absolute Virtue kill could take 18 hours or more. According to Verywell Health, red meat could trigger symptoms for people with IBS. If you eat red meat every day, it could lead to stroke. A stroke is certainly a scary condition, and eating red meat is thought to increase your risk of having a stroke. Yes, you read that right. Because Square Enix apparently loves to torture their players, they continued this ridiculous trend with their next FFXI Big Bad, Pandemonium Warden. So, if you don't want to worry less about that particular health issue, it's probably a good idea for you to not eat red meat every day. A 2011 study from the Harvard School of Public Health that was published in Stroke found that men who ate more than 2 red meat servings daily had a 28% higher stroke risk than those who ate about 1/3 of a serving each day. Of the study he co-authored via Reuters, Frank Hu, a professor of nutrition and epidemiology at the Harvard School of Public Health, said, "The main message from this paper is that the type of protein or the protein package is really important for the risk of stroke. Red meat isn't necessarily an automatic trigger for strokes, so you don't have to totally cut it out, but doing other things like exercising to prevent strokes isn't a bad idea. The more red meat you eat every day, the more at risk you are for disease. Most things are fine in moderation, including red meat." In August 2008, one guild spent 18 hours battling Pandemonium Warden through 20 different stages, before finally giving up after players started passing out or getting physically ill. The fact of the matter is that the more red meat you eat, the less healthy it is for your body. One player involved in this attempt estimated actually defeating the boss would have taken them another 2 to 5 hours. In fact, the American Institute for Cancer Research recommends a limited amount of red meat consumption for most adults. The American Institute for Cancer Research says, if you eat red meat, limit consumption to no more than about 3 portions per week. The institute also advises people to consume very little, if any, processed meat. According to Professor Martin Wiseman, who is a scientific advisor for the World Cancer Research Fund, the evidence on processed meat and cancer is clear-cut. Within 2 weeks of this incident, the developers drastically reduced the difficulty of Absolute Virtue and Pandemonium Warden. The data show that no level of intake can confidently be associated with a lack of risk. They also implemented a 2-hour despawn timer on both bosses to prevent future marathon battles. Processed meats are often high in salt, which can also increase the risk of high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease. So, while red meat could be fine in moderation, processed red meat is more dangerous. Despite these changes, it still took another 5 months for a guild to finally defeat Pandemonium Warden. Thinking about not eating this kind of protein at all? Here's what happens to your body when you stop eating meat.